A warm welcome to all of you dear students to the EDUHUNT IIT and NEET Foundation program. In this particular video class, we are going to learn about the properties of ionic compounds. That means the properties shown by ionic compounds we are going to discuss. Okay? Okay? So let us consider properties of properties of ionic compounds. See, ionic compounds are formed by the electrostatic force of attractions, which we have discussed in our previous class. Electrostatic force of attractions are holding those all ions in the formation of ionic compounds. These ionic compounds will have a special properties, will have a characteristic properties. Those properties we are going to consider now. First one, the ionic compounds will have high melting points as well as boiling points also. Boiling points generally we consider whenever those compounds are in the liquid state. Okay, and most importantly, most of the ionic compounds are in the solid state. Most of them are in the solid state, crystalline state. So they possess actually high melting and boiling points. The high melting points, the melting points of ionic compounds are very high comparative to the remaining covalent compounds. The reason for this is the strong electrostatic attractions. Got it? The strong electrostatic attractions between those ions will impart higher melting points to the ionic compounds. Okay, if those compounds have to convert from the solid state to the liquid state, okay, they require generally relatively higher temperatures. Relatively higher temperatures are required by the ionic compounds. Ionic compounds తాలూకా melting points చాలా ఎక్కువ ఉంటాయి. ఎందుకు ionic compounds melting points ఎక్కువ ఉంటాయి అంటే రీజన్ ఏం చెప్తాం, their force, the bonds that are holding those ions are very strong. So in order to break those bonds, higher energies are required. That is why ionic compounds are having higher melting points. Okay, this is one point. The reason, what is the reason for these higher melting points? Strong electrostatic attractions. Strong electrostatic attractions are the responsible factor for the ionic compounds having this high melting points. Got my point? And at the same time, you should remember that the ionic compounds melting points are very sharp. Okay, ionic compounds melting points, they are having sharp melting points. Sharp melting points. If I say, for example sake, some ionic compound, name some X, that ionic compounds melting point, if I say some 82 degrees Celsius, immediately after this attainment of the temperature, that means 82 degrees Celsius, that entire ionic compound is going to convert from solid state to liquid state completely. That is what we are mentioning, the sharp melting point. That means if that compound's melting point say some 82 degrees, after reaching the temperature, that entire compound is going to convert from solid state to the liquid state. That is what we call it as the sharp melting point. So dear students, here you have to remember 2 points. One is the ionic compounds melting points are high, okay, higher than the comparative covalent compounds. Their melting points are high, and at the same time their melting points are sharp. Understood? They have got sharp distinctive melting points. The reason is all these compounds all the ionic compounds, after attainment of that particular temperature, they immediately convert themselves from the solid state to the liquid state. Got my point? So this is about the melting points. Even if some of the ionic compounds, if they might found in the liquid state, then they possess higher boiling points also. If they are in the liquid state, only liquid state compounds, okay, liquid state containing ionic compounds, very few examples will be there. Okay, those compounds, while converting from this liquid state to the gaseous state, definitely they will have the boiling point. We mentioned the boiling points, no? Those boiling points are also higher. The reason is same. Got my point? So this is the first property. What is that one? Ionic compounds are having higher melting and boiling points. This is our first property of ionic substances. Now the second point is ionic compounds solubility. If you consider solubility, see, ionic compounds are more soluble in polar solvents. Ionic compounds are more soluble in polar solvents. Ionic compounds are soluble in polar solvents. Okay, this is the point. What are polar solvents means? The solvents which are having higher dielectric constant. If any solvent, if I say a solvent kaite dielectric constant value, dielectric constant, this is one constant value possessed by each and every solvent. Okay, so that dielectric constant value, if that particular solvent is having in the higher range, if this dielectric constant value is higher, if it is higher, immediately you can say it is a polar solvent. What type of solvent it is? It is a polar solvent. So simply, polar solvents are those solvents which are having higher dielectric constant values. Okay, these ionic compounds are soluble in those solvents which are having higher dielectric constants. That means they are soluble in the polar solvents. See, one of the best example for the solvent having higher dielectric constant, or in fact the highest dielectric constant, is water molecule. Water having highest or higher dielectric constant value. Dielectric constant value. So what it implies? Water dielectric constant is very high, right? Because its dielectric constant is high, we can say water is polar. So water is a solvent. So water is polar, hence it is a polar solvent. So because water is a polar solvent, most of the ionic compounds get soluble in water. Simple. So most of the ionic substances get soluble in water because water is a polar solvent. Got my point? So ionic compounds are more soluble in water. More soluble in water. What is the reason? The reason is very simple. Water is a polar solvent. Okay, hence all the ionic substances are soluble in water. So this is our second property. So ionic substances are soluble in polar solvents, especially in water. They are very less soluble or even insoluble in non-polar solvents. Understood? Non-polar solvents definitely have lower values of dielectric constant values. Okay, so this is related to the solubility. So till now we have discussed two properties. Got my point? One is there is solubility, and the first one is the melting points and boiling points of the ionic substances. Okay. Next, the third property of ionic substances we are going to discuss is their reactivity. Okay, or the reactivity, if I say, in the case of reactivity విషయానికి వస్తే ionic substances or ionic compounds participate చేస్తున్న reactions, they are instantaneous. You can say instantaneous reactions are those reactions which complete within no time. కళ్ళు మూసి తెరిచే లోపల ఆ రియాక్షన్ కంప్లీట్ అయిపోతుంది. For example sake, if you consider a reaction between two compounds, say sodium chloride in the aqueous form. Aqueous form means which is dissolved in water, please remember. Okay, aqueous sodium chloride, that means a solution we are considering. When this aqueous sodium chloride, oka test tube lo aqueous sodium chloride తీసుకున్నాం, right? We have taken aqueous sodium chloride in one test tube, and in another test tube if you take silver nitrate aqueous solution of silver nitrate. Okay, two test tubes, one is consisting of this sodium chloride and other one is consisting of silver nitrate. If you add the sodium chloride to silver nitrate, or if you add the silver nitrate to sodium chloride, what happens? Within no time, within the blink of eyes, understood, this reaction is going to take place. What is that reaction? This Na, Ag and Cl minus and NO3 minus, these ions regroup themselves. Within no time they convert into AgCl plus NaNO3. Understood? So AgCl is a white colored precipitate and NaNO3 is also formed in that reaction mixture. So once you add the NaCl to AgNO3 or AgNO3 to NaCl, within no time, in front of your eyes, you will be observing the formation of this AgCl. AgCl, a white colored precipitate. Until then, those two liquids are colorless. ఆ రెండు కూడా colorless liquids. Two different test tubes లో తీసుకున్నాం. ఈ రెండింటిని ఒకదానికి ఒకటి కలిపిన వెంటనే within no time, మనం కంట్రెప్ వేసే టైం కన్నా తక్కువ టైంలో you will be observing a white precipitate formation. What it indicates? The ionic reactions are very fast reactions. Very fast reactions means these reactions are very fast reactions, and we say such reactions, very fast reactions, as instantaneous reactions. Instantaneous reactions. So ionic reactions are very fast reactions, and these reactions are instantaneous reactions. Why? Immediately our question, why these reactions are instantaneous and very fast? Because for these substances to combine themselves, what should happen? There must be the ionization of these ions. First ఆ రెండు సబ్స్టెన్సెస్ కలవగానే ions split అవ్వాలి, ఆ split అయిన ions తిరిగి regroup అవ్వాలి. Understood? This Na plus and NaNO3, this Ag plus and this Cl minus combine together. Once they split, immediately they regroup themselves and forms the AgCl white precipitate and NaNO3. Understood? In front of your eyes you can notice this one. So what is the conclusion? Ionic reactions are very fast reactions. Very fast reactions generally are called as the instantaneous reactions. So all the ionic substances reactions are very fast. So simply you can say the reactivity is very high. Okay, so this is the third property related to the ionic compounds. Now let us move to the fourth property. Okay, the fourth property is related to the isomerism. Fourth property is related to what? Isomerism. See, ionic compounds or ionic bonds are non-directional. Remember this, ionic bonds are non-directional bonds. Please do remember this point. Ionic bonds are non-directional. So once the bonds are non-directional, ఎటువంటి డైరెక్షన్ వాటికి ఉండదు కాబట్టి you cannot observe any kind of isomerism in ionic compounds. Ionic compounds లో isomerism అనే ఫినామినా పెద్దగా మనం నోటీస్ చేయం. ఎందుకు నోటీస్ చేయం? అయానిక్ బాండ్స్ అన్నవి నాన్ డైరెక్షనల్ బాండ్స్. బాండ్కి డైరెక్షనాలిటీ ఉంటే అక్కడ వచ్చే వేరియేషన్స్తో డిఫరెంట్ టైప్స్ ఆఫ్ ఐసోమర్స్ అన్నవి ఫార్మ్ అవుతాయి. ఓకే, సో ఐసోమర్స్ ఫామ్ చేసే స్కోప్ ఇక్కడ లేదు కాబట్టి, బికాజ్ ఈ బాండ్సే నాన్ డైరెక్షనల్ కాబట్టి యూ కెన్ సింప్లీ సే అయానిక్ కాంపౌండ్స్ డు నాట్ ఎగ్జిబిట్ ఆర్ they won't show the isomerism. Okay, so ionic bonds are non-directional, hence they won't exhibit isomerism. Please observe this, they won't exhibit isomerism. Isomerism అనే ఫినామినాని అయానిక్ కాంపౌండ్స్ ఎగ్జిబిట్ చేయవు. వై? వాట్ ఈస్ ద రీజన్? మీరు గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాల్సిన పాయింట్ ఏంటి? బికాజ్ అయానిక్ బాండ్స్ ఆర్ నాన్ డైరెక్షనల్ బాండ్స్. నాన్ డైరెక్షనాలిటీ బాండ్కి లేకపోతే ఐసోమెరిజం అనే ఫినామినా జనరల్గా వర్కౌట్ అవ్వదు. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ ఆర్ fourth property. So ionic compounds do not show the isomerism. Okay, this is our fourth property. So till now the first, second, third, fourth. Okay, in the last question only the last property, that is isomorphism. Okay, isomorphism ane characteristic, isomorphism ane property ni ionic compounds exhibit chestayi. Quick ga adento observe chedam. So you can say this as the fifth property, isomorphism. Isomorphism అంటే అయానిక్ కాంపౌండ్స్ అన్నవి వాటికి స్పెసిఫిక్ స్ట్రక్చర్, క్రిస్టలిన్ స్ట్రక్చర్, షార్ప్ స్ట్రక్చర్ అన్నది వాటి సాలిడ్స్ ఫార్మేషన్లో ఇన్వాల్వ్ అయి ఉంటుంది. సో దే హ్యావ్ ఏ వెరీ స్పెసిఫిక్ క్రిస్టలిన్ స్ట్రక్చర్. ఓకే, అండ్ ఏవైనా టూ అయానిక్ సబ్స్టెన్సెస్ ఇలాంటి క్రిస్టలిన్ స్ట్రక్చర్లో సిమిలారిటీ చూపించింది అనుకోండి. ఓకే, అండ్ దేర్ నెంబర్ ఆఫ్ అయాన్స్ ఆర్ ఆల్సో సేమ్ in that entire structure, then those two structures can be called as isomorphs, and this phenomena is called as isomorphism. See, ionic compounds లో కొన్ని ionic compounds ఈ isomorphism అనే phenomena ని చూపిస్తాయి. They exhibit this isomorphism. Ionic compounds exhibit this isomorphism అంటే having same crystalline structure and same replica of the molecular formula. Understood? For example sake, two ionic compounds if you consider ferrous sulfate and zinc sulfate. These two different ionic substances will have the same crystalline structure. Same crystalline structure. Right? So because these two ions are having the same crystalline structure, okay, and at the same time in these particular formulas you can notice that cations are having the F2 plus and Zn2 plus, both the cations are having the same kind of charge, and both the anions too, here in fact the anions are same, sulfate ions, so automatically their charges are same. So those ionic substances whose molecular formulas are resembling and are having the same crystalline structure are generally referred as isomorphs, and this phenomena is called as the isomorphism. So dear students, please remember ionic compounds show this isomorphism. Okay, got this point? So this is our fifth property related to the properties of ionic compounds. So all are able to follow these five properties now? Very simple and important. I'll repeat this very quickly. See, ionic compounds are having characteristically five important, they show five important properties. Okay, the first property is ionic compounds are having high melting and boiling points. The reason being is ionic compounds are held up by strong electrostatic forces, hence their melting and boiling points are high. And they have the sharp, I am repeating this word, sharp melting points. And second property is ionic compounds show solubility case. If you consider, ionic compounds are more soluble in the polar solvents. So polar solvents are those solvents which are having the higher dielectric constant. So ionic compounds being more having higher lattice energy, etc. So they are polar first of all, because two different ions will exist, no? So definitely they are polar. These polar substances are soluble in polar solvents. Got it? So that is related to the solubility. Third property, we discussed about the reactivity. Ionic compounds reactions are very fast reactions. Understood? We simply say the reactions are instantaneous reactions. Okay, that means for these compounds to convert themselves into ions, for splitting into ions and regrouping themselves to form the newer compounds, which take microseconds of time. Within blink of eyes, those reactions get completed. Hence you can say these reactions are very fast reactions or instantaneous reactions. Got it? And fourth property we discussed is the isomerism. Ionic compounds, simply you can straight away say ionic compounds do not exhibit the isomerism. What is the reason? Because ionic bonds are non-directional, so they won't show isomerism. And fifth and last property what the ionic compounds will exhibit, this one, isomorphism. Ionic compounds, some of the ionic compounds, if they are having same kind of crystalline structure and are having same kind of molecular formula, then those structures are called as those compounds are called as the isomorphs, and ionic compounds show this phenomena generally referred as the isomorphism. Hope all are able to understand these five simple and important properties of ionic compounds, which are definitely useful in solving some of the important questions. Okay, dear students, so these five properties are very simple now. I hope you will read this now itself. Within no time you can get these five properties of ionic compounds. ఈ వీడియోలో చెప్పుకున్న విషయాలు అర్థమయ్యాయి కదా? జస్ట్ వీటిని ఒకసారి ప్రాక్టీస్లో పెట్టండి, అది ఆటోమేటిక్గా మీ పర్మనెంట్ మెమరీలోకి స్టోర్ అయిపోతాయి. వీటిని ఎప్పుడు అవసరమైతే అయానిక్ కాంపౌండ్స్ క్వశ్చన్స్ ఎప్పుడు మనం ఆన్సర్ చేసినా మీ డేటా తీసుకోండి, యూ క్యాన్ ఈజీలీ సాల్వ్ దెమ్. ఓకే, సో బిఫోర్ గోయింగ్ టు దిస్ వర్క్ సెషన్, in the next class we are going to solve the questions related to all these compounds, all these concepts which we have discussed in our previous videos. So all of you be ready that we are going to solve the work session 1, which consists of around 68 questions. In 2 parts I am going to solve all those questions and explain you very clearly. అర్థమైంది కదమ్మా? So all are be ready with these all concepts. In our next class we are going to consider the worksheet 1. Okay, so in this class, that's all for today. In this class we have considered the properties of ionic compounds. Hope all are able to understand this. Okay, thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Thank you.